Good evening, everybody. In June this year, I went to America for my daughter's graduation, armed with lots of little gifts. And every time I gave a gift to someone, I would say a small gift from a bankrupt country, a small gift from a bankrupt people. And as the days and weeks went by, I just asked myself this question: are we truly a bankrupt people? Or am I unintentionally, inadvertently saying bad things about my people which were not true? Last year, we gave a village in Mottiakulam an RO plant. And this lady came up to me, she held my hand, and she said, though I'm here today, I have no water to cook rice. She said she had to wait for the men folk to come back home in the evening to get water from the collection point. Sometimes she said there was water, sometimes there wasn't. And if there was no water that day, because it rained and the Bowsers couldn't get there, then they would have no food and no water. But the thing is, even though the country was going through a really bad time this year, when Sri Lanka was in fact declared bankrupt, when the dollar was fluctuating, when there was no electricity, when there was no gas, and there was no petrol, and there was no so many things, people decided, because of that one comment that lady made, that they would make sure that as many people as possible in Punahari would have water. And in the middle of May this year, before I went to the US, 5 RO plants were commissioned to 3 divisions in Punahari, giving water to 8 villagers every day, all the time. We are not a bankrupt people. We are a people who realize that giving is a privilege. A few weeks ago, I was invited by ICBC, International Christmas Charity Bazaar, to address a gathering. And after we spoke to them, one of the biggest discussions we had that went on maybe for about 45 minutes to an hour is what are we going to do next year? And yes, we were going to give bikes. But the biggest question that came up is, what about exercise books? Are we going to see empty classrooms again? How many of our children are not going to go to school because they don't have 1,000 rupees to buy exercise books? Are we going to wait till another child commits suicide because they don't have money to stitch a uniform or because they don't have exercise books? But musicians contacted me and they said, you know what? We are going to have a concert and we are going to raise money. The yacht club spoke to me and said, we are going to have a sailing event and we will have a sundown barbecue. Artists said they would paint. The hospitality industry said they would cook. We are not a sleeping people. We are not a sleeping nation. We rise up. We rise up when duty calls. So there is no way that we could say that we are a bankrupt people. A few months ago, I walked into this village house where we had planted a home garden. And as I walked in there, this little girl came up to me and she said, come. And she took me around her garden, and we plucked the bandakas, and we plucked the karavila, and we plucked all the vegetables that they had grown. She showed me the chili that they were drying in the sun. And as I was sitting and eating with them, she said that it's so lovely that when her father is not fishing, they work together as a family in their garden. She said that they had collected 500 rupees a day and they put aside for their savings. They were talking about how their neighbor has started this saving book so that their children would never have to not go to school. They thanked us because we were giving them grower bags and helping them to use fertilizer scarcely and water wisely. We are a people that are good stewards. We are not a bankrupt people. Every time I go to Punahari and give dry rations to people there, they always come up and they give me something. Maybe a Kattakolamba mango, or they have baked a cake, or suddenly you see this child riding past and lifting up his bike, shouting, Ape Lanka. You get this lady who would come and say, thank you for caring about us. We are a people who appreciate what we do for each other. We are not a bankrupt people. Today, we are going through a really tough time. We can't deny that. We are walking through the shadows again. We are walking through the fire. We are walking through the wilderness. But we have done it before. We all remember the tough times that we grew up in. I remember standing with my mom, waiting for or trying to collect one bottle of black sugar, or we had to have one loaf of bread with gullas in it, or my mother screaming at my stepfather because he was going to the harbor to bring in a ship. He was a harbor pilot because someone had been shot. I remember running and screaming and crying to Bishop's College because a bomb had gone off just next to my daughter's classroom. But we survived those times because we are a resilient people, because we are overcomers. And we can be overcomers today. A few weeks ago, I came across this Bible story that I had forgotten about. It was about 3 guys, Abshak, Meshach, and Abednego, I think they were called. They were apparently bound, really bound tightly. And like a sack of potatoes, they were thrown into this fiery furnace. And then suddenly, you saw them dancing and singing and laughing in the fire. And when they came out, not even one hair on their head had been singed. But every single cord that bound them had been burnt out. What is binding us today? What is binding us? What is preventing us from reaching our full potential? What is preventing us from transferring knowledge and building each other up? What is preventing us from being good stewards of all that we have been blessed with? Our forests, our birds, our oceans, our people. We are truly a best nation. And as we walk through this time of difficulty, as we walk through this valley of the shadow of death, we should look into each other. We should look into ourselves as a people and a nation and ask ourselves, what is binding us? And do our best as we can, to break those what is binding us, to shred those cords. A few weeks ago, I met some friends, a lot of them were guys, and in the usual guy way, they would say, so Machang, how? And the answer people were saying is, surviving, Machang. We are surviving. No, we are not going to just survive. We are going to be alive. We are going to be alive to the needs, the concern, the challenges and difficulties of people and communities like Punahari and Pachiyapali. We are going to be aware of the difficulties that they have and remember that they don't have what we take for granted. Let us be servant leaders today. Let us be cheerful and sacrificial givers. Let us act timely. Let us be wise. Let us just respect each other's differences, challenge each other's flaws, and let's just purpose upon our hearts that we are going to walk into a Sri Lanka that we want to live in. Our home, our nation. The time is now. Thank you.